Whatever you're doing, it's setting the stage and the table for other people to be able to become what they're designed to be.
Take us back to that accident that you had that kickstarted this whole journey.
Some of us need these shock events. Some of us are better at listening to the whispers of life.
You're standing on the top of the mountain. What is that like?
And the crazy thing about Everest is that and when we were climbing, there was an avalanche, and the avalanche.
Do you believe that we should always have a pursuit, something we're striving for?
In those pursuits that we learn who we are and where we're weak and where we're strong and how we can show up as a better version.
If you took away everything and I was just like the number one lesson that you learned.
And that's heavy.
Welcome to the Jenn Gottlieb Show.
Welcome back to the Jenn Gottlieb Show. I'm here with my dear friend, Jenn Drummond. I feel like we became best friends in like one meeting.
100%.
It was one of those things. And
like, we know each other. You're me. Yeah, it was perfect.
It was so perfect. It was just like, you're my soulmate. I feel, well, we met at like a mutual friend's house.
Yes.
He wasn't really my friend. He's more your friend, right?
Yeah. And he's your friend now too.
Yeah, he's my friend. He wasn't my friend at the time. And I see her, I see you, and I was like, oh my God, that is like a badass woman. And then you end up telling me that, well, you can tell the story.
Yes.
How we're really connected.
How we're really connected is we have the same stylist.
Yes.
Annabeth, we love you.
Shout out to you.
Shout out. So we met the same stylist. I was actually nervous about coming to the party because I didn't know anybody except the host. And so I'm like, oh, I get nervous in these environments and I have to socialize and blah, 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 blah. And she's like, oh, well, you'll know Jenn. Tell her that I like connected you and da, 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 da. And so when I met you, it was a deep breath. I'm like, oh, there's my person. We're good. I don't care about everybody else here. We're fine.
Isn't that the best? I always tell people that about networking. You just need to find that one person.
One.
And just one. And if you can just like let yourself be vulnerable with someone, like announce the uncomfortableness in the room. Like I felt like I could just be with you. I was like, oh God, okay. You know, like, oh, this is like it was kind of a weird house. Remember we were just like, what's going on here? Right. And I was like, I found my girl.
Yeah. Like they have the manifest of the Titanic, like this is magic or whatever. And I'm like, can I take my shoes off because my heels were hurting? And everything was perfect.
It was wild, but we became besties in an instant. And I was like, I cannot wait for us to sit down and talk, because what you all listening don't know, what you're going to know over the next hour, is how absolutely incredible this woman is. Now, it actually shocked me when you just said that you were nervous to go to that party because you've climbed Mount Everest. Yes. She's climbed Mount Everest. Okay. And she's climbed 7 mountains. I don't want to butcher it. Tell me exactly. It's like the 7.
Yeah. So and we'll get into the details, I'm sure, at some point, but I set a world record on becoming the first female to climb the 7 second summits, which are the second highest point on each continent. Harder than the first 7.
Harder than the first.
And it was a pursuit I took on because I needed to prove to myself that I could do me and be a mom and run a business and do all these things. I didn't have to sacrifice myself for these other parts of my life that I think a lot of us get caught in that trap of doing.
Of course. And I want to make sure everybody knows that you're not a professional mountain climber.
No.
So I want to go back there. I think this is a really great place to start. And we can maybe even start at the point of which where you realized that you needed to start living life a little bit more. Take us back to that accident that you had that kickstarted this whole journey of you going from never climbing a mountain in your life to now having world records of being completed.
Well, so I think some of us need these shock events, right? Some of us are better at listening to the whispers of life. When you get that whisper, the message isn't so loud. But I needed the shock event of a car accident that should have taken my life and thankfully didn't. I remember coming home for that accident and just being in awe of life, right? Like every moment was magical. And it removed all these pressures that I put on myself from before. It's like, I can try things and not be good at it. I can do things and fail. In fact, all the people that are judging me are going to be under the ground around the same time I am. So why do I care what they have to say? We all check out of this place at some point. The only person I need to report to is him upstairs. And when I really connected into that and realized he made this world for me to experience and explore and become, it changed the game. And so I started writing a bucket list of what I wanted to do, what I wanted to see, what kind of impact I wanted to have. I knew I was saved for a reason. And my gift of life, the only way I could pay that back was doing something significant with it and say thank you for letting me have more time with my kids and my family and let me have more time on this amazing planet that you gave us. And so I started making this list, and it had everything from tasting pasta in Italy to swimming at like the Great Barrier Reef to climbing a mountain. I live in Park City, Utah, so mountains are all around. And I decided for my 40th birthday, I was going to climb a significant mountain.
And you have never climbed a mountain before in your life?
I had never slept in a tent before in my entire life, okay? So
wait. And there's a very important thing we need to mention while you're all listening to this story. She has 7 children. So you also have 7 kids. So you've never climbed a mountain. You're raising 7 kids.
Yes.
And you're like, I'm going to climb a mountain. Let's do it.
Yes.
Okay.
And I was climbing a mountain named Ama Dablam, which at the time I was told it was the Paramount Pictures logo. So every time I went to a movie with the kids, I'd be like, I climbed that mountain. And it felt perfect. Well, if you remember back in 2020, COVID happened. So I wasn't climbing anything anywhere. And in fact, I was becoming a homeschool teacher because school shut down and all these little kids needed me to play multiple roles. And I remember one day, one of my little guys woke up and he was struggling with his math because I was that homeschool mom that was like, no, we're doing this stuff. We're staying on task. And he was like throwing a fit. And I did that parent pep talk that we all do. We do hard things. You've got this, buddy. Finish your math and we'll go play in the ocean. And he looks up at me and he goes, Mom, if we do hard things, why are you climbing a mountain called I'm a Dumb Blonde instead of a real mountain like Mount Everest? And I had to sit there for a second. I'm a dumb blonde. Ama Dablam, honey. Not I'm a dumb blonde. But thank you. We'll look at Everest. And we did. And he went to bed and I thought about it. Perception is reality. And if he thinks Everest is the hardest thing in the whole world, I'm going to climb it. And I'm going to show him that whatever our Everest is in our lives, we can summit.
So your son challenges you to climb Mount Everest. And most people, if their son challenges them to climb Mount Everest, like, sure, we'll do that, right? And okay, maybe he'll forget about it after tomorrow after we've done whatever else we need to go do, watch the movie about someone climbing Mount Everest. But you actually go and you do this. Take me through what's the process of going from someone that's never climbed a mountain before in their life to making the decision that you're going to climb a mountain to actually sticking with that decision? Because most people will say, yeah, I'm going to climb it one day, and then let fear get in the way, let all the excuses get in the way, let the 7 children that you have to raise get in the way. You have every excuse under the sun.
Yeah.
What was the process that you took to both overcome all of that resistance that I'm sure was in your way to actually make this happen, if there was any, and then the actual tactical steps that one needs to take to do something like that?
Yeah. So for me, I'm like, I was hungry, right? Like I was in a spot in my life where I had been going through the motions and I needed something significant to wake me up. So timing, I think, played a role into it. But I called a coach and somebody that was kind of famous in the industry for training people. Alan Arnett is his name. And I remember calling him, kind of hoping he'd say, no, you're not going to be ready, right? Like, I'm like, hey, Alan, like, I'm interested in climbing Mount Everest. He asked some questions about my fitness background, which I was, a soccer player in college and I did triathlons and stuff. So I wasn't foreign to the fitness aspect of it. And he goes, yeah, I think I can get you ready for next season. I'm like, oh, okay. There went that excuse. And so I started reading books on it. I started reading training things. Alan introduced me to people that had climbed Everest before. And when I met those people for lunch and they spilled ketchup on their shirt, I'm like, I do that. I spill ketchup on my shirt. Okay, this person isn't a superhero. They're normal. They're just like me. And I started to normalize this quest. And I did that for a couple months before I shared it with anybody. And I think that's a really important thing to think about, because had I called my mom, that's me sabotaging myself. Oof. Because my mom would have been like, no, you're not. Right? We know who we call for different things. There's girlfriends you call to go shopping with. There's girlfriends you call for business advice. There's girlfriends that you call because you want a certain lesson. And so you have to be really conscious of who that call is, because are you doing it to support what you want to do? Or are you doing it to give you permission to get out? Because that's an excuse.
That's so interesting. I think many of us definitely do that self-sabotage thing by telling the wrong person. Yes. And it's so unconscious. It's so unconscious. But I think that inner, I call it the inner BFF, the inner blocker of future fulfillment, right? Like that part of us that's resisting doing the thing. So it's like kind of trying to sabotage us by doing really sneaky stuff. And I think like calling your mom or somebody that won't believe in you would definitely be something to sabotage you. And the fact that you could be like, nope, don't call mom. Don't tell anyone. You rose above self-sabotage in that moment.
Yes.
That's massive.
Yes. And I mean, it shows up. It's sabotage is creative. So you always have to be on your A game with it. So I was really getting into the rhythm of the things, meeting people, watching the videos, doing all the things that normalized climbing Mount Everest. And once I normalized it, it made it possible. And I made a list of what I wasn't capable of doing. And I made a list of skills that I needed to acquire and kind of gave myself check-in points of, am I acquiring these? Because as you celebrate progress, you get momentum, and that helps you continue when days are hard. The nice thing is when you talk to people that have done the thing that you want to do, they can help you stage things that are more difficult. Because if I can do it more difficult here, then it frees up my bandwidth to handle things when I'm there. Mm-hmm. Right? So yes. I was climbing rocks that were harder. Anytime it was a terrible snowstorm, I would go outside in it, because then I knew how to dress for it, how to prepare for it. So if that showed up on the mountain, it wasn't a first. There's just like a lot of little things I think you do to really prep yourself to have success, because it's won in practice, not on the actual climb.
1,000%. So you go on this journey and you train for it and you prepare for it and you put yourself in all probably more difficult situations before you even climb the mountain than climbing the mountain. But I really want to hear about your experience of getting to the top of the mountain. Because many of us, especially like high achievers or people that like to achieve, right? We have this addiction to achievement. I know a lot of people that listen to this podcast are high performers, overachievers, people that love to go for the goal and get the goal. And what I see a lot of the time is you get the goal and then you immediately move the goalpost higher. Mm-hmm. And it's like, how long do you celebrate the goal for? Mm-hmm. And I would love to hear a task like that, a goal like climbing to the top of Mount Everest. You're standing on the top of the mountain. What is that like? What does that feel like? And for how long does that celebration last?
Yeah. Okay. So like one little caveat is Everest was training ground for me. So I think one of the things that made Everest easier for me than what it does some other people is that I had another goalpost harder than Everest behind the scenes. So K2, which is the second highest point in the world, is definitely more difficult than Mount Everest.
Oh, wow. See, people don't know that. Perception's everything.
Perception's everything.
I'm sitting here like Mount Everest is like the highest mountain in the entire world. I don't know.
Yeah, so it's the highest, but not the hardest. Okay. So for example, when I went to climb K2, 25% of the people that pursued K2 died in its pursuit. And Everest does not have those statistics. And so I went to Everest thinking, okay, I'm going to learn how I do higher, because K2 is not as high. I'm going to learn how to layer. I'm going to learn how to fuel. I'm going to learn all these different things, because on K2, I don't have the room to learn these things. I need to come in with that knowledge. And so for Everest, it's interesting. Of the people that don't summit, I would say 80% is mindset. Okay. And then the crazy thing about Everest is that I was on the top of Everest for 10 minutes. I trained 1,238 hours for 10 minutes on the summit of that mountain. And that kind of goes into what you're saying. We focus so much on this destination or this achievement or this goal or this like box to be checked that we forget that it's truly the pursuit of that box being checked that gives our life meaning, not the actual achievement of it. And if you can't learn how to celebrate the experience of becoming, you're going to be hungry at the top. And you're not going to be able to sit and enjoy it as much, because you're like, this is it. I want more. What's next? How do I keep getting more? So when I was on Everest, It was magical. I mean, let's be honest. You get the raise, you get married, you have the baby, whatever the significant event is. We all know that feeling of pinch me, this is my life, right? I took in this huge inhale and everything disappeared. There's no time, there's no distance, there's no mountain, sun, me. Like we were all this one piece of energy. And then you exhale because you can't live in that space. And I think naturally we say like, that's amazing. Life is amazing. And we take our soul and we throw it out into the universe and we say, I can't wait to find you next and my next pursuit. Because it's in those pursuits that we learn who we are and where we're weak and where we're strong and how we can show up as a better version.
Do you believe that we should always have a pursuit, something we're striving for?
You know, when I finished the world record on June 1 of 2023, I made a promise to myself that I wasn't taking on another pursuit for at least a year. And
did you stick to that?
I did. Mm-hmm. I did stick to that because here's the deal. My kids are watching and my kids are my accountability partners. And I don't want them to feel like life is always in the chase. We have to have a season of winter, of rebuilding, of recovering, of restoring of who we are. And so that when we take on that next pursuit, we have full batteries to do it.
I love that. What was that like for you, going from a season of anticipation, a season of pushing, a season of training, a season of having this thing to look forward to, like this big thing that you're preparing for, getting the thing, and then stopping for a year? Was that really nice or was that torturous?
It's torturous, especially for those of us that get lost in the doing, right? Like we define our lives by what we do. It's really hard to be a human being. And this year of rest has been just that challenge of embracing a different speed that I'm not used to, a different way of like, you go to the gym and like, I knew what I was doing every single time and what kind of things I needed to train and what it all looked like. You go to the gym, I'm like, I can do whatever I want. I don't even know what that is. And so it takes a little bit to get used to, but then once you get used to it, you find a way to appreciate it.
What have you learned the most about the space in between?
Being kind to myself makes me stronger. I think I've been really hard on myself. And anytime I try to achieve something, I'm always like fine tuning it and how does it better? And giving that space to be a beginner, to be bad, to be uncertain, and learning how to navigate that with kindness instead of harshness.
Amen, sister. Okay. So one thing that we didn't discuss that I know everybody is leaning into in a big way. How did you do all of this and have 7 children that you were raising, and you have beautiful kids and you're an incredible mother, and you not only climbed 7 mountains, but you wrote a book, you speak all over the place, you're here podcasting with me.
Yeah.
And you do all of it. Do you come from the world of you can have it all, or are you more like, sometimes I'm more mom mode, sometimes I'm more this mode? How do you manage all of this in your mind? Or do you do it all at once?
I think you're going to have seasons where you do awesome in one category and not as awesome in another category, and accepting that and understanding that you're just giving more color to a term. So let me explain that a little bit. My biggest fear of climbing Everest wasn't the mountain. It was my children. And I'm like, what are they going to do? How are they going to be? Is that a good mom? Like, what does this mean? And I like lined up grandma and the nannies. And I mean, they had everything calendared, organized, put together, all of it. And so then I went to the kids' school and I said, hey, listen, I'm going to go climb Everest. I'm going to go on for a little bit. Everything's taken care of, but just because I'm not there, I know they're going to be off a little bit. Can you give them a little bit of grace? And the kids' school came back and said, why don't you come in and teach these kids about setting Everest-like goals and talk to them about what it takes to set an Everest-like goal? So I went into the classrooms. I talked about goal setting. They colored hikers that had little backpacks, and on their backpacks, they said what their Everest goal was, like make a Black Diamond ski run, make a travel soccer team, go bike across whatever. It was super cute. And then when I went to Everest, I had a tracking device on me. so the kids could track me on where I was on the mountain, and I had Wi-Fi at base camp. So I could Zoom call into the classrooms and all this other stuff. And so I was very connected to what was going on, but very removed. And I was gone for 3.5 weeks. When I came home, I didn't summit. My whole community summited. All those little kids summited. Like, we all did this thing together. And it was so magical because my kids got to see what it was like to be loved by a community, to have other people show up for them in ways that if I'm there, they don't have the opportunity to. And so it just it widened our definition of what it meant to be a mom.
Wow. I just got goosebumps for that one. All right. So I can imagine that every step you took on every mountain that you climbed was a personal development lesson. Yes. I can only imagine. You're probably like writing 85 books in your mind. Every single turn, every single night you had to sleep in a tent in the freezing cold, or you had to push even though it hurt. And I can't even imagine. I mean, I can, because you wrote it all in your book. But I'd love to hear from you. I'm sitting here across from you, and I'm just genuinely curious, like, what's the biggest one? Like, if you took away everything and I was just like, the number one lesson that you learned climbing all these mountains and challenging yourself and going on this journey to do something that you've never done before in your life, completely unprepared to take on this journey, what was the biggest lesson of them all, if you can think of one?
Yeah, and that's heavy. I think like the biggest thing is like when we commit. So like I committed to setting this world record. I had failure. I had to go to mountains twice. I buried a friend. Like, friends lost hands to front. I mean, like, every single thing that could have gone wrong had gone wrong at some point in the journey for the most part. But I committed to that goal being done. So I wasn't ever negotiating whether I was going to do the pursuit or not. I was always negotiating on, how do I benefit more people when I'm doing this pursuit? How do I make it more enjoyable? What am I learning from this experience? So it was never, I'm not going to build the thing or do the thing or whatever. It was always, okay, this is the experience I'm having. Is this the experience I want? Is there a way to make more possible for myself and others? Is there a way, what's the lesson here? And if you look at every single setback and obstacle and thing as an opportunity, because that's where you have energy to place it instead of like, should I do this or not? So much more magic shows up in everything that we do, right? Like, you put together a like build your brand live event. It's never like, I'm not putting this on, right? I mean, this thing is happening. So like when you put that event on, now that you have that like table set, now you decide like, okay, what kind of vibe do I want? What kind of people do I want? What will make this even better or more memorable or more fun? Or what did I learn? Or what kind of exercises can the group do to build the bond that when they leave there, they're like, yes.
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, that's it.
Exactly. It's happening whether you like it or not.
Right.
How do we squeeze the most juice out of the lemon that is this journey?
Yeah.
How do we fully empty the tank of this experience? You quickly like went over the bad things that happened.
Yeah.
I'd love to just unpack that a little bit and to know, like, yeah, I don't think there's anything successful or worth doing without failure, without fear, without mess ups, without really crappy, shitty things happening. What were some of those scary or bad things that happened on your summits that you learned the most from?
Yeah. I talk about this one in the book, but I think it's so significant to highlight. I talk about it in speeches. I talk about it a lot. You know, K2 was a dangerous mountain. National Geographic called it a woman eater, right? Like, you have all these stories and everything going around about this thing that you need to climb.
Why is it a woman eater, not a man eater?
Because for some reason, the first 9 women that went to summit it died in the mountains within so many years of climbing it. So it just statistically had taken a handful of lives that they called it the woman eater. So you had all these stories about it. I'm like, well, that can't be my story because that's not successful. So I need to shut all of that out and write my own story. And so when I got to the mountain, I very much connected to its energy. A lot of things didn't feel right. I kind of ignored those things and kept thinking, we get in those. Is that my doubt? Is that my fear? Is that whatever? And when we were climbing, there was an avalanche. And the avalanche took like an extremely experienced, talented climber's life. And I should have been climbing with him that day, but like the way things set up, like I was a day ahead. So it was just bizarre on how you couldn't plan it, right? Like you couldn't pick any of the pieces. It was just interesting how it all unfolded. And I was on the mountain and another team came up to me and they said, "Hey, Jenn, we're going up. Your teammate just died. Do you want to go up with us? But your team's going down." You know, and I had saved money and trained and my kids are in camp and like, there's a million things that are like, yeah, I do kind of want to go up, right? But then there was an even bigger thing saying, I can't go up. My teammate just died. Like, I need to go take care of my team. And so I went down and I helped bury a human. And I hiked the 55 miles out and took the cars and the trains and the planes and everything to get home. And when I got into LA, I called my nanny and I'm like, I'm not ready to come home. I had so many things happen that if I walked in those doors and my kids saw me, I can't face them right now because kids know the truth. And my kids were at camp still for a few days. So my nanny's like, hey, no one's expecting you back this early, so this is fine. So I sat in my room and started like writing down all the failures and everything that went wrong. Nothing was too small, like scratchy toilet paper. I mean, if they're a real country, get real. But you know, like everything. And I like processed some of the stories to take me out of victim to victor. I came home and I remember one of my kids running in the door and they're looking for me like, Mom, did you summit? And I said, no, I didn't, but I had success. And he's looking at me like, what do you mean? Like, honey, in your life, you're going to have options where you have to put people over peaks. And I put the team ahead of my goal. And I'm proud of the person I showed up as. And I hope when you have an option to take care of people or to get to the end, you decide to put people first. And so you can say that, but I don't know if you always believe it 100% either, right? Like, you know it's the right thing, but there's still a lot of disappointment with it. It's not like, hey, this is the right thing and I feel great. This is the right thing and I'm like, why? What? Da-da-da-da-da, right? So it doesn't feel good at all levels, but it still feels better than what the other story would have been. And so I'm training to go back to K2. And we all know this story where you have failure and now you got to go back and do the same thing again. So now you have this memory that you have to overcome that makes it harder. And if you're running into one of those circumstances in your life, like, you have to dig deep and make it bigger than yourself on a whole new level, because that bigness has to overcome the experience you had before. So I had gotten a phone call a few weeks before it was time to leave, thank goodness. And it was a person that was training to climb K2, but didn't have the resources to do it. And so I'm like, oh yeah, we have resources up the wazoo and, you know, Utah and everything. All the outdoor companies are there. So I went back to K2 in 2022. I brought a whole bunch of gear. I put this person on my team and we climbed. So July 22, I became the third American female to stand on top of the summit, which was cool. But even more significant is 30 minutes later, the first Pakistani female stood on top of her country's prized peak. One of the first Muslim females to stand on top of one of these significant mountains in the world. And I look back and I think, man, I was just using my lens to look at my experience. When I surrendered to what I felt like was right, the universe, God, force, whatever you want to label it, was using me for more. I just didn't know it yet. I had to live it all out to see that now not only do I get this success, but I get to play a little role in somebody else's. And all of us know how addicting that is.
Mm-hmm. Was there any moment climbing that K2 after like the second time that you had a traumatic like PTSD moment from that happening, or was there fear? Or was it like, no, there's nothing here. Like, I'm going to get to the top no matter what. Like, I'm just putting myself in I'm like at the edge of my seat right now. Yeah. I don't know if I could keep going. I would think about that. My friend dying on the mountain, burying my friend. Do I keep going? There's got to be so much fear. I feel like I'm watching a scary movie right now. I'm sweating. How did you get there?
Good. Like, because the universe works in crazy ways. I got violently ill at base camp, like violently ill, that I went on antibiotics. It made me a little healthy. And then it came back when antibiotics, like, and I wasn't throwing up. Everything was coming out of me. So at first we thought I got giardia, which is not if you're going to get it. It's when you're going to get it in these kinds of environments, because our bodies just aren't used to everything over there. And I went on antibiotics 3 times and I lost probably about 25 pounds. And all of a sudden, when you climb these big mountains, there's weather windows. So it's like, hey, you either climb now or you're not getting it, because everything's lining up for things to go. And so it's time to go. And the guy that's running my expedition is like, you're not going. Like, you are sick. You cannot go. I haven't seen you eat in days. Like, this is not possible for you. It's not safe. And I looked at him. I'm like, oh, no. I'm not coming back to this country. I'm going to climb this mountain. I don't care how sick I am. And so because I think I was so sick and so focused on just getting up that mountain, that my brain didn't have time to even think about the other thing. And so when you're doing something extremely hard and scary or whatever, there's 99 things you can focus on that are not going to help you. There's normally one thing in these extreme environments that you can focus on that is, and you need to find out what that thing is and just have that be your mantra on repeat and go, 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 breathe, step, move, whatever that is that shuts out anything else that's not serving you. And so I think I had to be sick to be able to make it up the mountain, because it's the only thing I could focus on. And here's the craziness of it all is I'm at the mountain, we celebrate, she celebrates, we all head back down to safety, and I have a satellite phone. So I can call home and let everybody know I'm okay, and they can check the climbing device. And so I get to the spot where I have my phone and I have a voicemail on it. And my voicemail on it is, I have 2 children in Yosemite National Park at a camp while I'm gone. So that everybody's doing something. And the message is that my kids didn't like camp. And they wanted to check themselves out. And they're at the age where they're not forced to be at camp. So they're with a private counselor until somebody can go pick them up. And so I call camp and I'm like, this is cute. Like, their mom just climbed K2. Like, I'm kind of cool right now. I don't know if you know. My kids can handle Yosemite National Park. So thank you. And she's like, no, actually, they're in this space and you'll have to come get them. And here's how much money extra you're paying a day until you get here. I'm like, privileged children, right? Like, I'm furious. So I leave my gear there. I hike out as fast as I can to get home as fast as I can. And I get them from the airport. And here's the thing with movement. I'm so bad at myself that I can't be as angry as I was when I first found out when I see them, right? And so I grab them and they look at me and they're like, Mom, I think you're really sick. I'm like, I am really sick. They're like, I think you should go to the doctor. So I went to the hospital. Because at this point, I'm throwing up water. Like, now I'm like, things are not working. And I get to the hospital and they're asking all these questions and they're running all these tests. And they're just like, I don't know what's wrong. And then one of the doctors goes, hey, were you by farm animals? Like, no, I wasn't by farm animals. I was climbing a mountain. Like, no, I was by farm animals, because they carry all our gear into base camp. And in fact, I'm the person that's always worried about the farm animals. So every day I checked on them to make sure they were good. And one day, one of those animals sneezed on me. He's like, I know what test to run. So they ran another test and I had anthrax. Yes, so anthrax is a bacteria that is in farm animals, typically in third world countries, that if you were healthy, you would fight off. Like, it wouldn't have a chance to grab onto your system. But because I had giardia, I was on this antibiotic, my system was wiped out, I got sneezed on. They think the bacteria went airborne into my body, set up home. The antibiotic was kicking it back, but it never got rid of it entirely. And the doctor said, I bet you have, I was on IV antibiotics. He goes, I bet you have about 2 days to live if you didn't make it back here. The normal hike out of K2 is 7 days. I wouldn't have made it. And it's like this thing in life where if you just keep doing your thing, but you listen, you're taken care of. It's crazy.
I don't have words.
I know, normal guest for podcast, obviously.
Oh my gosh. JT's back there. I just have to pause for a second. He's like, I am at a loss. Life, we're always taken care of. I believe if we're sitting here right now, you're listening to this, you're breathing air, you are alive, you're on this planet right now, you can look back and see how we are always taken care of.
Always. It's so humbling. Like if you really sit, it gives you goosebumps to think of like how really cared for we are.
Now, I can imagine that this must seep into your everyday. So I don't have any experiences like that in my life. Mm-hmm. But I do have experiences. I mean, I guess you could say like the way that you look at it, like your perception is everything, or it's all subjective. But there is experiences that I've had in my life that I've had to overcome. Nothing like that, but to me, very traumatic, that every single time something really traumatic or hard, or like that God was there for me, whatever you believe in, the universe was there for me, I then equip myself a little bit more for the next experience. So the next time something's in my way that I'm just like, oh, I'm fine. I already experienced this. So here you are, having summited 7 mountains and almost died, watched a friend die, and I'm sure, and you guys read the book, please, because there's probably a zillion other stories of things you had to overcome and mindset things that you had to learn along the way. Tell me how this changed how you are as a person on regular planet Earth, going through regular people experiences, because I want the person listening right now, even if they're never going to summit a mountain, to maybe learn from some of the experiences that you had that taught you how to shift your perception about things, or push a little bit harder, or trust yourself a little bit more. Yeah. How do you navigate life now?
Yeah. Well, we all have mountains. Like whether you're climbing one physically, I think all of us are climbing them metaphorically if we set a goal that we're trying to achieve. And for me, I'm always like, what happens is going to be a memory. So if I have a memory of continuing to try, or continuing to push, or to learn how to like take this information in and utilize it for me, then that I'm strengthening that memory and I'm strengthening that skill, and that's going to just help build me. And I guess my fear is having a thing that I gave up on, because now that's in my body. Mm-hmm. And now once you do it once, it's easier to do it. And so I'm just very conscientious of, okay, what does future Jenn need that today Jenn can do? And I just take myself out of the moment and think about how whatever I do today exponentially helps me tomorrow. And that gives me the strength to continue on. And like you said, it's all perspective. I mean, and I learned that lesson 10 times over every single day on every single mountain. On one of the mountains, we were in horrible whiteout. Okay, a whiteout where you can't see the road, you can't see anything around you. You are like literally the rope in front of you is what you're just following. And it's interesting because when you're in whiteout conditions, you don't use normal goggles because that would make the environment too dark. So you have to change your lens. And your lens is either typically an orange, a yellow, or a pink lens. Of course, I'm picking pink. I'm a girl. So I have this pink lens on. And after doing like a few steps, all of a sudden my brain's starting to wander. And I feel like I'm in a cotton candy machine because there's pink snow blowing everywhere, right? And then I'm thinking about going to the fair with my mom when I was younger. And I'm thinking of that song, Watermelon Sugar High, because the rope looks like a watermelon rind. And my brain starts to just play. And when you climb, you have a watch that goes on that will ring every so many hours, because at altitude, you don't get a signal of being hungry, but you have to eat. So the watch goes off and you're like, oh, it's time to take a break and drink and eat so that we stay ahead of things. And I remember the watch going off and I'm going into my bag and I bumped my glasses. And when I bumped my glasses, like I was freezing, I was cold, what is going on? Why are we here? Like all my happy bubblegum pink cotton candy world was like a light switch off. And all of a sudden I'm asking my teammates, like, what are we doing in this? Why are we still hiking? Why are we moving? And my teammates are looking at me like, why are you like shocked right now? This is what we've dealt with for the last 2 hours. You're acting like it's brand new. And I sat there, I'm like, if that's not a lesson on perspective, I don't know what is. So now anytime that I feel exhausted or tired or whatever, I realize like that's a lens. And that's my cue to sit with myself and be like, what other truth is possible? And how do I lean into that?
It's a lens.
It's a lens.
Can we change the lens?
Yeah.
Can we change the way that we look at it? Mm-hmm. Can we just decide that we're in a bubblegum fairyland right now if we need that to get through that moment?
Right.
Are you afraid of anything right now? Is there anything that you're battling right now? Any mountain you're climbing? Or do you even experience fear after everything that you've done?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Fear always shows up. I mean, fear is part of breathing, I think. There's a book I read that fear will always be on the journey. The key is to put it in the passenger seat and not give it the steering wheel.
Well, that's Big Magic, Elizabeth Gilbert.
Yes. There you go. Yes.
I talk about that.
And so for me, I always think about that. I'm like, okay, well, it's here. What seat is it in? And how do I put it in the back seat? Or how do I get it to take the microphone away from it so I'm not listening to what it has to say? Mm-hmm. But you just learn how to drive down the road with it.
What are you driving down the road with now?
Oh, so I'm in a Porsche Cayenne. Mm-hmm. And the reason why is because that's what I was in when I got in a car accident. And so when that went end over end and rolled sideways, and the police called me a couple weeks after the accident, and they said, if you were any other car, you'd be dead. And in fact, we don't even know how you're alive in that car. We cannot rebuild a scenario where you live or walk based on the rebuilds that we've been doing of that accident. He goes, I think you should buy this car for the rest of your life. I'm like, thank God I wasn't in a Honda Civic. Thank you very much. I will buy one of these the rest of my life. So I've stayed loyal to that brand.
I love that.
So the reason that I ask what you're afraid of right now and what you're doing is I love to ask that question to really successful people that I admire. And I do that because it's really easy to listen to podcast interviews of people that are crushing it, that have done incredible things, and look at their highlight reel on social media and think like, oh my God, they're not a beginner in anything. They're an expert. They're a master. They're just crushing it. They're not afraid. And I always want to make people feel a little less alone and understand that we all have fears, that we all have insecurities, that we're all a beginner in something, especially someone like you or someone like me. Like if you're listening to this, you get it. Like people that are always trying to achieve something, whether your achievement is, I'm trying to just have a year of doing nothing. That would be an achievement for me. Yes. And I'm sure it's very hard for you. Maybe that's the thing. But I like to ask you guys, like, and I want to ask you specifically because I'm so blown away by you and impressed by you. Like a mother, you summited 7 mountains, you speak, you wrote a book, you're so stunning and beautiful and like so well spoken. And I'm just so impressed with you. And I know everybody else is sitting here thinking that too. Oh my God, she's so perfect. I want to know, what are you a beginner at right now? Or what are you afraid of? If you wouldn't mind sharing with us to take us on that journey so that we know like, okay, we're all in something.
Yeah, no,
we're just beginning.
And I make sure like I keep things that I'm a beginner at, because then I get used to metabolizing that feeling and it doesn't become so foreign, which makes it even scarier.
Yeah.
Like I'm terrible in the kitchen. People tease that I burn water. Okay. I mean, it's that bad, but you know, like I'll forget an ingredient or like, I don't know. It's not my wheelhouse. I'm also really bad at swimming. And so anytime that I feel like I'm like getting high on myself, like I'll make myself cook dinner or I'll make myself go swim laps in the pool and just remind myself like me swimming laps in the pool is maybe my kid trying to figure out his math homework. Maybe it's this person trying to do this that I'm working with, I'm coaching on or whatever. And it just puts me back into their shoes and their feelings so I can tap into that empathy and continue forward for them and for myself. Because we're always taking on new things, right? You're interviewing new guests, you're trying different ways to dress. You're like, all of that is new and scary. You're sharing your makeup journey every morning when you're like, hey, here's what I'm thinking about. Here's what I'm talking about. All of us are having those conversations all the time.
You're obviously very out there now. Like you're podcasts, you're speaking, you're writing books, and I know that this wasn't, the plan initially. Right. How does that feel? Do you love it? Do you ever get imposter syndrome? Do you ever feel like, oh my God, I'm so petrified to be seen right now? Or is it just like, I love this. This is my mission.
I forget. I was in Switzerland last month doing a climb, and somebody on Instagram's like, did I just see you walking down the street in Switzerland? I'm like, I'm in a teeny tiny little mountain town and someone recognized me and I met them for coffee afterwards or whatever. And I just remember thinking, oh, wow, like this is getting out. And now I have to be more aware of how I look when I leave the house or just different things that you think about. But I think it's such an honor because when we get to share experiences with each other and connect through those different moments, I get to borrow their courage. They get to borrow my courage. I get to learn about what they're doing. They get to learn about what I'm doing. And we both become better people. Yeah.
It's such a way to connect. And I love that you're just like, yeah, let's go. Yeah. I mean, I think that it's just it's a different mindset coming from somebody that's gone through what you've gone through and done it. And you did all that stuff, not because you had to. You made the choice to do it, which is totally like, man, I'm just so unbelievably like impressed by you, and I've gotten so much value from this interview, and I know that a lot of people are sitting there with their jaw still on the floor listening. And if you're watching, please watch on YouTube because like you definitely need to see this amazing woman. And we've got the book here. Definitely get the book, Break Proof. I mean, I just want to like end with you sharing anything that we missed, that like talking to my listener, the person that's sitting there, and I have a feeling if you're sitting here listening to this right now and you're at the very end and you've been here with us the entire time, you're very inspired by Jenn. But for this person that maybe is like on the fence of taking that next step in whatever it is they want to do, maybe it's writing a book or launching a podcast or climbing a mountain, whatever mountain that is for them, what would you say to them as some advice to somebody who's done it in the actual sense, climbing the actual mountains and pushed yourself to the end? What advice or pep talk would you give them?
Yeah, I'm going to bring you to my experience on Mount Everest, which is the second highest point in Antarctica. I woke up on the mountain that morning and we were going for the summit push, which was an 18-hour day. And I looked out into the world of nothing, right? Like frozen tundra. And I just remember thinking, I'm here. I'm here because my grandma and my mother and like society before me set up the world so I could be here. Because if I had been born, my mom or grandma were born, it wouldn't have been an option for me to be on this mountain. So I climbed it and became like the first American female to summit. And it was like I stood up there and I waved our flag and it was like, I am so excited to see where generations take this, because no one in my family saw me doing this, but whatever they did set the stage for it to happen. And so for you listening today or watching today, like whatever you're doing has ripple effects that you don't even know, that you might never know, but I promise you it's setting the stage and the table for other people to be able to become what they're designed to be, because you're showing up as your authentic self and doing you. And maybe you don't take it all the way to the top of the mountain, but you climbed up there, you learned something, and now that lesson you take to whatever next pursuit you do, and it matters.
And it matters.
It matters.
Thank you, Jenn.
Thank you.
Jenn, where can everybody find you? Where's the best place to connect?
Yeah. So check out my website, jenndrummond.com. Mm-hmm. That will bring you to all the links and all the things, depending on what platform's your favorite. And say hi. I would love to meet everybody.
You also have an awesome podcast.
I do.
What's your podcast called?
My podcast is called Seek Your Summit. Mm-hmm. And I share stories of people that have reached the top of the mountain and decided that they needed more. And so what does that look like? So it's taking a life of success into a life of significance.
Woo! Great tagline, sister.
Yeah.
My gosh. I need to take a nap after this one. That was so impactful. It was amazing. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Oh, you're wonderful. Thank you for tuning in to the Jenn Gottlieb Show. We will see you next time. Make sure that you share, subscribe, all the things, and give Jenn a shout out. Tell her how much you enjoyed this. See you next time.